First turned professional in 1986, the game of professional snooker has gone through some enormous changes. But during that quarter of a century, nothing can compare with the massive transformation in the game due to China's love affair with snooker. The rise of Chinese snooker increasingly influences every aspect of our sport. When Ding Junhui made his Crucible debut in 2007, there were just 5 Chinese players in the top 100 on the professional tour. 5 years later, that number has expanded to 10%, while the number of UK players has been reduced to 75%. Ding is still the biggest star in the Chinese firmament, and the face of the game in his home country and abroad. But he is no longer a lone pioneer. No fewer than 4 Chinese players made it through qualifying to join Ding at the Crucible.
Snooker's a meritocracy now. It's entirely dependent on talent. Wherever you are from the world, you have your chance. And I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on the top players as well. There's going to be less and less protectionism for the top players. They've got to produce.
That pressure was applied by Chow Yu-peng, the only Chinese player to progress past the first round, after a fractious match with Mark Allen.
战胜马克艾伦刚刚从海口公开赛拿了一个冠军，当时还没有与他对战的时候，都感觉到非常紧张。但是这场比赛我赢了他，我感觉到非常开心，因为我打出了自己的水平，在克鲁斯堡打出了自己的水平是非常不容易的一件事情，因为这么多观众，然后这么大的压力，感觉到很开心。
Because he's quite clearly a very, very good player, and his ranking position is probably the most false ranking position I've ever seen. If he keeps up like that, he's got a very good future.
At the moment, that future is in the UK. Chow, like many of the Chinese players, has based himself in Sheffield to take advantage of the Star Academy at Sheffield United's training complex.
They tend to come from wealthier families. That's the only reason they get over here, a little bit like when they're students as well. There's lots of youngsters coming through. There's a Chinese ranking system over there. They encourage the youngsters to start very early. There's good players over there from 10, 11. And the ranking really depends on whether they come over here or not.
But how long before there are enough practice partners and tournaments in China for the exodus to be in the other direction?
Woo!
In 2007, the China Open was the only Chinese ranking event, with just a few other non-ranking overseas events on the snooker calendar. Fast forward to 2012, and China now has the majority of ranking events, with 5 compared to the UK's 3. There are lots of other UK and overseas events, such as the PTCs, but the big money ranking tournaments are increasingly in China. This season's China Open in Beijing provided a snapshot of the game's increasing popularity. Big crowds, lots of merchandise, and a genuine enthusiasm for the sport. Every player in the top 16 was there, but despite a prize fund of £400,000 and a winner's prize of £75,000, not everyone is enthusiastic about travelling overseas.
In China's China, I don't like going out there. No one likes going to work, particularly, and it's the other side of the world. I've got a young family, my little son, I love him to bits and I want to be with him. I don't want to be getting on a plane to China, but they're putting a lot of money into the game at the moment. No, the people in this country aren't, for whatever reason. So, it's opportunities to go and play and earn money. Us as players either take them opportunities and go, or we don't.
China is snooker's biggest market, I think, at the moment. So I think it's essential to have PTCs in China. So it's nice for all the Asian players and the Chinese players to have a chance to play in the homeland.
But the players are having to get used to it. 5 ranking tournaments in China next season, and the expansion is likely to continue.
Well, I can't over-express how important China is as a market for us. You know, we are next year going to have 5 ranking events in the People's Republic of China. We've expanded over the last 5 years from about £500,000 prize money to $2.25 million. So obviously, extremely important market.
In 2007, the prize fund was dominated by UK money, with less than a quarter coming from overseas tournaments. But now the financial pendulum has swung to overseas currencies, with the Chinese yuan making up the majority share of the players' pot.
Effectively, the prize money on the world snooker scene 2 years ago has now been matched just with the Chinese events on its own. So that's pretty dramatic for 2 years. So you've seen the CCTV event came in as the biggest event, bigger than, as big as the UK Championships for their first one. If it does reward the sponsors with high viewing figures, which it looks as if it will do, I can only see one way, an upward spiral.
The change in TV viewer reach has been astonishing. The World Championship reached 84 million people in 2007. 5 years later, the UK audience has remained static, but China has propelled overseas viewership beyond the 350 million mark. With 287 TV channels, 400 million TV sets, and an increasingly affluent society, television in China is experiencing the sort of boom that the US TV industry saw in the 1950s. And it is the appeal of televised snooker that is attracting sponsors to the table.
斯诺克这个运动呢，从我个人来觉得哈，它这个在中国呢，它的这种赛事的这种怎么说呢，和高尔夫比，它的赛事的这种价值呢不是很高，但是呢，在中国它的受众人群是最大的，所以这个呢也是会是很多这种企业它所看重的。再加上现在呢，就是不管是电视、网络、平面各种媒体对于斯诺克的赛事的报道都是会很大的力度，所以说呢，这个也是吸引赞助商的一个方面。
So we've got over 240 million people tuned into the Betfred.com World Championship last year, which is making up probably about 2/3 of our entire television viewership. So, as I said, China is a fantastic market for us.
If China's love affair depends on the success of its future stars, then the game should be in good shape. Some schools are now enjoying snooker as part of the sports curriculum.
What a fantastic school. 2,000 pupils, staff put a table in, they put a pool table in. In England that was the sign of a wrong thing to do, but in China you can see it's appropriate. And they take their sports very seriously, and snooker's a good thing to have in the school. It just shows you, how the world has changed. To have a snooker table and a pool table in the school is phenomenal.
Hey. And what of the future of snooker's crown jewel, the World Championship itself? Will that also be heading east?
其实对于斯诺克世锦赛能否落户在中国呢？ 这个我不好说。但是呢，中国现在这个政府也好，还有这个企业也好，他们是有这个实力可以让斯诺克世锦赛落户在中国的。当然了，只要沃德斯诺克愿意，谢菲尔德愿意，这是没有问题的。
Oh, I'm not silly enough to say that I don't have to look at alternatives, but the overall feeling for me and the remainder of my board is we stay here if everyone wants us enough.
The rise of Chinese snooker continues to have a huge influence in every aspect of our sport. And if their passion continues, then the future of our game lies far to the east of its traditional home.
Yes, just to underline, 5 Chinese players in the draw this year. Kenny, how long is it going to take before we double or even treble those numbers in the Crucible draw?
I don't think it'll be that long, maybe 10 years. I mean, the growth of the game in China is expanding all the time. I mean, when I first went out there, it wasn't as big, obviously, but there's so many kids, there's an undercurrent of youngsters taking up the game, and very, very early. I mean, I've heard lots of stories of kids leaving school at the age of 10, 11, 12 and 13. Their families are pushing their kids to try and follow in the dream that Ding Junhui has passed through. And they're trying to jump onto that bandwagon. But the kids that I've seen playing there, as young as 13, 14, unbelievable, making century breaks, even 10-year-olds making century break. It's incredible to see. And it's quite refreshing when you go out there because they have a passion for it. They love the game. And it's great to see that we have so many tournaments out there.
Steve, obviously you and Kenny and of course John have been out there many times. Can you compare the boom times that are there now with what was happening in the 70s and 80s here when snooker was becoming a big televised sport then?
Yes, what happened to television in the UK was they started showing it on prime time, and people that didn't even walk into a snooker club started to get hooked on the game. I imagine that's what's happened out there. It's not just the people that like the game, it's the millions that have started watching and getting hooked like they did in the 80s. Interestingly, in the UK, especially when people come up to you and say, oh, what about snooker, it's dying, they don't really, unless they're going to watch this TV programme, they don't really understand what's happening worldwide. Because it's not just going to be China. There's going to be emerging markets in India and all places like this. This game is going to go ballistic. It won't be going to ballistic in the UK. Because, for whatever reasons, we've turned our attentions to other things. Not the snooker fans, and great, not the BBC. But as Barry Hearn said, as long as they want us, we'll stay. But if one day they don't, it'll be off like a shot over there.
Yeah, well, next season, John, there's going to be an Asian Order of Merit, which is obviously a new thing in snooker as well. And clearly, we look at the number of participants, and Ding Junhui, as we said in that film, has been the trailblazer for the Chinese. Who's the next big thing for them, would you say?
These two boys may be better qualified. That you've played in those PTCs and played in some of them over there. They may be better qualified than me to know that, because obviously I don't still make that trip over there. But it is imperative for these countries to, that are going to take the boom, that they have a player in their own country. We used to see it in Thailand. They had James Watana. We've got Ding Junhui, who's been the forerunner for the Chinese players. It's so important in all these countries. We've got Luca Brissell in Belgium. We've got people like that who they will carry the game and get people interested.
Interestingly, Hazel, in 20 years' time, you might be asking the question, where's the UK player going to come from? Who's going to be in the top 16?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it might not be me asking the questions. I might have moved to China.
One interesting fact that I found out when I was in Shanghai, they have over 1,500 snooker clubs in Shanghai alone.
Incredible.
They probably don't have 1,500 in the whole of Europe,
Amazing.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely. So that's what's happening in snooker. It really is a global game these days. But back to the here and now, and back to our final at the Crucible. Now, Ronnie O'Sullivan, as you may know, is attempting to join the likes of John Higgins and Stephen Hendry and a certain Steve Davis as a 4-time Crucible champion and add another chapter to his illustrious career here in Sheffield.
Ronnie O'Sullivan, for me, is the most brilliant snooker player I've ever seen in my life.
Ronnie O'Sullivan is the best player I've ever played in my career.
Unbelievable what he does. Makes the game look ridiculously easy.
If he could apply himself the way that some of the others have, then, well, he'd have broken every single record in the book.
He's still underachieved, even though he's won so much in the game.
Left, right-handed, doesn't care.
Ronnie, fast.
When he makes breaks, he's never out of position. Best I've ever seen by far, but off the tail screams. When he is there, he tries his best and he puts on a good show.
Ronnie O'Sullivan.